agencies, and we've heard requests from other folks who donation when we send our letter off to the House Appropriations Committee. So just you can be thinking about how does this fit into the big picture, and I don't know how long you need, but we'll have time for questions at the end, or should we ask questions as you're going?
This is our first time kind of presenting in a more the policy committee, so we can roll whatever way you like.
Okay. All right. Well, why don't we go ahead and get started, and if we have questions, we'll.
I might just ask them as we go. Yeah.
Right. All right. We're good.
Are we on?
We are.
Okay. Well, for the record, my name is Danielle Fitzko. I'm serving as the interim commissioner for the Department of Forest Parks and Recreation.
And I'm Ansley Bloomer, and I'm the Director of Finance and Administration.
So we're here today to present to you the governor's recommended budget for FY24 for the Department of Forest Parks and Recreation. And we can go where you want to go throughout this. The presentation we have is what we presented to the Appropriations Committee. So we'll kind of go through it that way. We'll give you an overview of the budget, some key changes from previous year, some one-time investments that are in the governor's budget, position changes, ongoing and significant initiatives. And at the very end, we have our budget development form, which kind of shows the ups and downs.
I think the one-time investments are where we'll probably have the most interest and want to have the most questions, just because those are the areas where we'll need to make careful, decisions.
We can kind of move through the other pieces more quickly, or do you
I think
first just to go to that?
I think maybe, no, I would say let's go through each slide just to we can have some context about what the department actually looks like dollar wise, and that would be useful.
And I don't have to do the overview of FPR because you already had that.
Right.
Okay, so we'll go to slide 3, and Ansley is going to kind of give you the quick overview of the budget.
Yep, so on slide 3, our personnel services expenses continue to be FPR's biggest expense across all of our 4 divisions. The increase for FY24 is due to a couple of different things. It's the normal step increases. It's about a 10% increase in health benefits, also increases in other benefits as well. And then also the other big one is a couple of RFRs. So we have an RFR for the 2 admin staff, RFR, request for review. So an alignment, if you will, of positions, steps, and
It's a reevaluation of the duties that the staff are providing to calibrate it to a different pay grade based on the work that they're doing.
Okay.
So you can be manager or staff can request that review. HR does that.
And then we also have an RFR for all foresters in the forestry division, there's 43 foresters, is that correct? And then the other big one is a RFR for all parks seasonal staff, which is funded out of the Parks Special Fund. And that is to the tune of about $1 million.
So are these reviews typically looking outside of government at what typical positions pay that might be competitive, and trying to make sure that you're able to staff the compensation is?
Yeah, the parks one in particular was done last year. The parks were staff that, we bring on 400 seasonals, we're getting about $11 to $12 an hour. Very hard to recruit in the current state. And they went up about $4 to $5. So they're at like $15, $16 an hour now. And recruitment's going well. It was just really under pay grade. And we did look within the state to other park sort of operations to calibrate, because we're all competing. And then for the forestry one, our forestry series is 30 years old. We have 43 foresters in only 3 classes, Forester 1, Forester 2, Forester 3. And we are unable to recruit and retain like we used to. And we're unable to really use our position structure to maximize the opportunities in front of us right now, because I can't move anybody up to take on new duties because it's sort of maxed out at a 3. So all these new federal funds coming in really aren't able to mobilize the staff. Our Forester 3s, I don't know if you know the pay grade, but it's pay grade 24. and they have responsibilities of supervision. They manage multiple millions of dollars. Their program managers are 28, so there's like not equity in the system. So we're proposing to go from Forester 1, 2, and 3 to Forester 5 to allow for growth within the system and maximize really the opportunity for staff to take on more responsibility. And we did a whole analysis, making sure that it aligns and we're set up for the future.
Operating expenses have soared everywhere. It's probably no surprise. Upward pressure is due to inflation, supply chain issues, and then the exponential increase in energy costs. The parks budget was hit especially hard. For parks alone, operating increases are anywhere from 8 to 40%. Firewood is $200,000 more than FY23, and FY23 was significantly more than FY22. So a lot of upward inflation and supply chain issue pressures there. Also with fleet vehicles for forestry, those are up 40% as well. And there's gas prices on top of that. So operating expenses are up across the board, as are they with contracts. And the grants being pretty consistent from 23 to 24. There's only one tiny little change, and that's due to a miscoded contract from last year. So back to contracts real quick. They're pretty level. There is one decrease actually in our contract expenses, and that's from the end of the Lake Champlain Basin program with forestry, and then also to achieve our 3% benchmark. Parks contracts have increased 500,000. So there's a little bit of up, a little bit of down there. The other line item I pulled out here is land acquisitions. We don't have any land acquisitions currently on the books for FY24. FY23, we did have the Alberg Bluffs land acquisitions. That's why you see a really significant line item for FY23 land acquisitions. We acquired 160 acres, 60 acres at Alberg Bluffs, which is a really exciting thing. And it looks a little funny in the budget if you don't pull it out separately, since it's a $1 million line item.
Was the FY22 amount an anomaly, that 4.6 million?
That's a really good question. I'm wondering, hang on, I have the budget numbers up. Let me make sure that's not a typing error real quick, so that I don't know.
Well, it's not critical to, no, I was just curious.
No,
Let's not, you can
I'm gonna
look at it later.
I don't think that's correct.
I have no clue, but we do have some large acquisitions that we work through, whether or not it's going to be land that comes into the state or we're purchasing easements. And so that could be Forest Legacy funds, because we had some land in Elmore that was that year. So that's probably that's federal funds coming through. My guess.
And I'm still new in my role, so I wasn't actually around in FY22. So I'm like, let me dig in there.
You got two newbies.
Are there any questions?
No. We're good to, Representative Lipsky.
In this budget, are there any projected revenues? And on what page here on the line one?
They are in, I don't know that you have actually.
I shared the budget book as well.
Oh, you did, wonderful. So they're pulled out in a separate, let me actually just look to see what it is.
And the other document that we shared is the budget book, which goes through revenue. Our primary revenue sources will be general funds, right? Then we have federal funds and parks special fund, which is all the gate receipts, concessions, boat rentals, firewood,
Right.
and then the ski leases.
Second part to my question is obvious, what do you anticipate stumpage revenue?
We don't, how much do we think we're gonna, that doesn't go into our budget. That actually goes into a trust fund called the Land Facilities Trust Fund. We average about $350,000 to $500,000 a year. That goes into the trust fund, and then we use about 5% of that each year is allocated to stewardship on state lands. So we get about $200,000 a year from that trust fund to support vegetation management projects on state lands.
would you feel on average you get about, how much in?
About 350 to
350.
That's just on state forests. State parks actually goes directly to the state park special fund. And anything that we do on fish and wildlife lands goes to fish and wildlife. So that is just on state forests.
And if you're
Yeah.
curious to read more, they're on page 8 of our budget book. There is more detail on the revenue sources.
Budget book.
And we have that, that's the other document.
Thank you. Thank you.
So the next slide, it's kind of shows you like big programming, where the money goes. You can see Parks has, I think I'll just give you the big overview, like where the money goes, big picture. So our overall budget's $3.4 million. Administration, which is the Commissioner's Office and Business Office, is about 8% of our budget. Forestry is 9.5 million, about 28%. Parks is the biggest at 16 million at 47%. And then DLAR, which is our Department of Lands Administration and Recreation, is about 17%. I'll just give you a beat on what each of the divisions look like. Forestry is 9.5 million. 6 million of that is general fund. About almost 3 million is U.S. Forest Service funds. We have a great relationship with state and private forestry. They fund a lot of our core programming. We do have some special funds, about 600,000, and then interdepartmental transfer, because we have a relationship with Fish and Wildlife, so we do work on their lands, and then they pay us for that. Overall in forestry, 80% of our budget is personnel. We have very little money for programming. We seek grants for that type of work. We're lean. We have awesome staff, but we're lean on operating and programming money. And then we do grant about $1 million out, which is Forest Service money just passing right through us. So that's the beat on forestry. Parks is 16 million. They only get $600,000 in general funds. So very little on general funds, but 5.5 million in their special funds. And of that, of Parks' overall budget, 75% is generated from Park Services. The rest of that is through a relationship we have with the 7 ski resorts on state land. So we receive a percentage of skier visits, and if we own buildings, some of the retail on that as well. And that brings in about 3 to 3.5 million that goes to Parks operations. And then the last one is DLAR, which is a lands administration. They get 100 million, no, they get 1 million in general funds. Wow. 2 million in special funds, which really passes through. We get funds to go through VAST, which is snowmobile clubs, and VASA ATV. And then some, so that just kind of passes right through. And most of their budget is really grants out, recreational grants out with WAREC, Land and Water Conservation Funds, and Trails and Recreation. So that's kind of an overall look at our budget. I can go to the next slide. Yep.
Representative Lipsky?
I apologize. This is actually a constituent issue. When you were talking about lease lands at ski resorts, is there a common lease document, or is each one tailored to the specific location?
They're all negotiated and different. And then when there's actually like a changeover that may get re-looked at, but they're all different based on negotiations.
In case you haven't gotten in the newspapers or the radio, it's a huge controversy in Stowe, Vermont.
If you ever want to have a 101 on our ski lease, Becca Washburn, Director of Lands and Recreation, manages all those leases for us and could give you all of that. We've actually asked for that at our management team meeting too, so we can all have a better understanding of how they operate.
Thank you. I'll reach out to Becca.
Some key budget changes for this coming year. I think Ansley already mentioned in her shop the reclassification of 2 staffs. In forestry, our big ask is the reclassification of the Forester series. In parks, we talked about this already. Again, the operating cost is just escalating for them, and they have to absorb that. And then also the RFR for seasonals of $1 million. Last year, they did do a price increase for parks. So that $1 million was going to be used to with price increases that we did last year. And those increases were just to really normalize where they should be, looking at other states. And then in DLAR, which you talked about, which is Lands Administration, the big change was we didn't have a large acquisition in our budget at this time. The next ones are one-time investments. We had 3 one-time investments in the governor's recommended budget. The first one is $500,000 for park housing. I think we've mentioned that 400 seasonals come in. One of our number one recruitment tools is being able to house staff. Park managers need to live on site. Some of the housing that we have is very old, from the CCC era. We haven't been able to make a lot of improvements. So this $500,000 will be used really efficiently. One of the things that we're finding is that we're seeing a trend in worker campers. So like if we set up RV sites that have electricity, water, and septic, that seems to be really attractive. They can come in with the RV or van. So this would actually allow us to put like 30 RV sites up. It will help us take some of our current housing and divide it so they have separate quarters, and then just make some overall repairs. We are also seeing a trend in like tiny houses. I think that's been a movement, and people are really liking those. So in like Groton State Park, they're putting like a little hub of tiny houses in for park staff housing. So that's where that investment would go. It's an ongoing need, and we're fortunate to have this one-time request recommended by the governor. The next one is actually an opportunity. We have over $2.5 million we grant out in lands and water conservation funds and recreation trail program to communities for whether it's trail stewardship, it could even be acquisition for recreation purposes. They have matching requirements, and we're finding some of our more rural, smaller communities are not able to meet that match requirement. So this $1 million will be used to support those smaller communities and providing that match for them. We haven't designed any criteria or anything around it yet, but it is meant to get those communities that are unable to access the funds the ability to. So that's the first 2. And then the last one is a one-time investment to support EAB, which is emerald ash borer, which is an invasive insect pest. We may have talked about it here before. That's marching its way across the state. We've been working with municipalities and utilities for years and saying, you've got to get out there and inventory and preemptively remove when you can. And we need to do the same at our mostly state parks, but some high use recreation areas like at trailheads or parking areas. Once EAB's in an area, trees could die within 3 to 5 years. We may not know we may not see the sign in the tree till that 3-year point. And then at the 5-year point, it's really very expensive to remove because the trees get so brittle that you can't climb them. You have to bring in equipment to remove the trees. They shatter. So preemptive removal is the way to go. And so this will help us get ahead of those high priority areas. And we've mapped out those areas. We've inventoried all the trees. Some parks have over 1,000 ash trees that are in target to either hit, we call them structures, targets people or structures. So just trying to be like proactive. So that's our 3 one-time requests.
Okay. Just maybe pause there and see if there are committee questions on the details of these requests. Anybody? I'm wondering, so the last program that you mentioned, if there weren't an intention to provide the wood for free, could it be sold? Could the logs be sold?
So each I forgot to mention that part of that. So each scenario is a little bit different. Some cases we can actually do a timber sale, depending on the infrastructure. Other cases, it may be a tree care company coming in and they just may take the tree away. And where we can, we feel like if there's an opportunity we will pass the word on to wood banks that can give it to low-income households. So in those cases, we can. Otherwise, so if we could sell it, it would go to a wood bank if it was that type of firewood material. But we will enter into some timber sales if it's appropriate and it can work. It just really depends on each site is so different with the infrastructure. It's not like going into a wood lot where there's not a whole bunch of stuff around because there's a lot of campsites and bathhouses and all that kind of stuff.
Got it. Okay.
So that we have a whole team sort of like working on the different scenarios and how to navigate that.
Representative Rice?
Is there any quantification of the amount of wood that would be given away? Or is that sort of, you'll know it as you go along, or?
Yeah, we don't know right now. Once they get into a situation, they work with the forestry team, works with state parks team, and they'll do an inventory and assessment. And they may have multiple things going on. They may have an arborist take care of one of them. They may have a logging contractor, and they may even treat. If they feel like there's a high value landscape tree, we can use pesticide on it. So we don't know. We haven't got to that point to lay anything out yet.
We have Representative O'Brien is joining us on Zoom today, and I think he had his hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Danny, I just wondered to give us an idea of how pervasive EAB is. Have you done an inventory of the 55 state parks? Do we know how many have EAB in them already?
We have it. So we have an infested area map for Vermont of where we know we have found emerald ash borer, and we also have a radius around those areas because when we can see it, it's probably about 5 miles beyond that. So we do have those high risk areas mapped out, and we've also done an inventory of all of our state parks and the number of ash trees. So we are prioritizing removals based on if they're in that high priority area first. And so right now, I think we have about 4 or 5 parks that are right in the center that we've already done this work in about 4 or 5 parks because we had to get ahead of it. But eventually, over the next 15 years, we expect we're gonna have to do it for every park. This is gonna be a long process for us.
Great. I guess we could have you back for a EAB afternoon. Where are the hot spots right now?
Well, we could actually pull up the map, but the hotspots, sadly, it's like all over the state. It's not like it just came in one area. It's kind of like scattered like a shotgun. And so I think it's in every county right now.
Wow, thank you.
But Montpelier is a hotspot right here. And the city itself has done a lot of work. They're monitoring and they've been removal. They have a portable sawmill where they're milling the wood to give it back out. So they've got a proactive program.
So other than the park land, then, is there money in the budget to deal with EAB on state lands or private lands?
So this is generally for FPR state land. Parks is our highest priority because they have the most infrastructure, but it will absolutely also get those high use recreational points or other assets on state forest as well. Okay. This is not funding for private land. We do pass through money that we've sought after from the Forest Service to pass through to municipalities. So I think we're giving out $60,000 this year to either inventory, because we have a robust inventory system for municipalities, and then removals, which we're starting to actually fund a little bit, and then also replanting, because ash was a very popular street tree. So if you walk down many downtowns, a lot of times could be a monoculture of ash. It was kind of like the vogue tree after the elms died. Everybody planted ash, and so now we're trying to diversify and help support replanting.
So this budget request is not limited to parkland. I missed it.
It's for FPR land, so state parks and state forests.
Yeah, great.
But not for private landowners. We do work with private landowners to help them understand and plan, but we don't have funding directly for those.
Other questions on the one-time requests? All right, let's keep going then.
The next slide is about position changes proposed. They're actually all in forestry. And we are very fortunate that the infrastructure law, the bilateral infrastructure law, provided some flexible funding to help Vermont implement our forest action plan, which is a 10-year vision to support our forests of the state. So we reviewed our forest action plan to identify like where we're doing well and maybe some gaps that we have going forward. So we're going to use those funds, we're proposing to use those funds to bring on at least 3 positions. One of them is a climate forester. We did have a climate forester that we, a couple years, well, she left this past August, but we got some money from American Forest and we had the first climate forester in the nation. We were very proud of that, but she left and then that position was reallocated to the ANR's climate office. And so we still feel strongly that we need forest science focused on climate in the forestry division. We need that scientific expertise. So this position would support thinking about carbon and carbon markets, carbon pools, adaptation of forests. It would be real science-based. Another position is we have so much information to share, but we just don't have the talent or skills to actually share it out. And so this position would be an outreach and communications position, so we can tell our story and also help inform Vermonters on how to be wise and active stewards. And then the third position with this pot of flexible funds is someone to focus on invasives. And right now, the primary one would be emerald ash borer, to really coordinate our efforts. We've been doing great to coordinate, but now we're going from slow the spread to actually management and thinking about how we preserve ash on the landscape long term. So this would focus on EAB, but a whole bunch of other pests are knocking on our door. We have ones that are looking at oak, beech, so just need to focus on that. And then there's one position that's also in the BIL bill is wildland fire. There's a lot of money come from the Forest Service for wildland fire, typically out west, but we're getting some as well to lift up a new grants program that would help communities plan for wildland fire. So this position would actually help get that money out the door, working with probably a lot of regional planning commissions and also municipalities for wildland fire preparation. And so that's all federal funds. And then there is one position request with clean water funds to support watershed forestry. In the division, we have 2 staff that focus on water quality. And there's so much going on to respond to the Lake Champlain TMDL and all that work. And the Clean Water Fund would help us lift up our forestry expertise and outreach to private landowners, thinking about the largest pollution load from forest land is roads. So this would work. We have a really robust system on state lands of inventorying our roads, identifying hot spots and practices to put in place. We want to transfer that to private landowners to take that clean water funds and target it to reduce pollution loading. That's the 5 position requests in forestry.
And these are all new positions. The slide is titled changes, but they're changes in their additional positions, not.
Correct. They are so we had to follow the ANR template.
No, that's fine.
But it is new. These are new positions.
And help me understand though, if the IIJA, that's the federal
Infrastructure Jobs Act.
That funding is presumably, I mean, what I would think of as one-time funding, and maybe it's spread out over several years, but it's not going to be available
So this
20 years from now.
This particular funding we'll have available about $340,000 coming in annually for the next 5 years. So we're anticipating that those positions would be 5-year positions, so they could really stand up and deliver programming for 5 years. At some point, we hope, I sit on a national committee on this, that we hope we tell the story enough that we can maintain this funding coming to states, this really flexible funding, which is so unique, and we're so grateful to have it.
And I was going to ask then, and I think maybe you've already answered the limited service positions. I know that's a technical term. Those of us who are new to budgeting and looking, in detail here, what is a limited service position?
Limited service positions can be acquired through HR if you have grant dollars associated with it. It's limited in service. So these would be proposed for 5 years. Hopefully you can bring in additional grant funds to continues on, but they aren't, and they have the same benefits as classified staff, but their service is limited because you can't say you have funding forever for them. Which sometimes is not a great recruiting tool, but it's a way for us to use granting funds to get necessary positions to do the work.
Right. Representative Lipsky.
Danielle, just semantically, climate forester versus a carbon forester, are they one and the same, or what's the proper
Yeah, well, we've decided to call it
specialty?
climate forester because we believe they're going to really have two tracks. They are going to be thinking about carbon sequestration, carbon management, carbon markets, where the pool of carbon is in forests, whether it's in the soil, the biomass, in the tree. So that whole carbon budget and understanding, but they also need to focus on adapting our forests for the future because of climate change. So that science of how do we manage our forests for them to be more resilient? How do we think species are moving because of climate change? So they'll sort of have two tracks and really be science-based to help not only our staff, but across the state really understand, what's going to happen to our forests, and then actually how to manage that. Carbon's it's here, which is where it moves in the atmosphere.
It's really the same personnel.
Yes.
With a broad view and then a specific element responsibility.
And we did test this out because we did have a staff person in that position for 2 years, and it was awesome.
Yeah, no,
Needed it.
that's what I understand, and then they were gone, so.
Well, Dr. Ali Kasiba, she's at UVM. She's the extension forester. So if you ever want to talk to somebody, she's a gem.
Thank you.
Okay. Good.
Yeah. And then, I think, next slide is pretty much a duplicate. And then the significant ongoing initiatives we've talked about before. We know we have the roadmap that we're working on. We talked about UVA already. A lot of money coming in for urban tree planting from the Forest Service. We just actually submitted a $7 million grant for urban trees. We talked about the Parks Modernization Study, so we'll know where we're going in 100 years from now. Parks connectivity is just getting Wi-Fi into mostly contact stations so we can operate. We've got the Parks birthday next year, 100 years. We got grants, federal funding, and business office improvements. That's an Ainsley shop, but it's a small shop of 5 staff, and you can't imagine the transactions for state parks alone. I think we did 11,000 invoices last year, so it's just a lot. The volume that they deal with is quite a bit, and we've taken a hit on staffing turnover, and then also all the influx of new money for granting out is just additional workload on a stressed team. So we're really focusing on improving that team.
How are, say, campground overnight rates determined?
That's the rule, and that's what we did have an increase in that last year. So that is set through rulemaking. There is last year they went, I don't know how much they actually went up, but there is a different rate for in-state and out-of-state, which is typically other states do. I think our rule changes last year estimated to bring in like $2 million.
I believe that's correct, yeah.
To the positive.
Mm-hmm. But then we had the temporary staffing increase, and then the inflation increase. So we really didn't get ahead, but it's the way it is.
How long had whatever the previous price has been in effect? How often is that looked at?
I can't answer that for sure, but Nancy could probably look at her computer.
Yeah.
Not every year. We try not to do it too often, but maybe, I'm going to guess here, maybe every 3 to 4 years.
I think the last time it was changed was 2015, 2016.
Oh, wow. So longer. Yeah. So it was a need. Things go up. Yeah. And we're really very reasonable in Vermont compared to neighboring states because we want to make it accessible. We want people to come enjoy them.
I did want to close the loop on the land acquisitions.
Okay.
We did have almost $5 million of land acquisitions in 2022, and they were Deer Lake and Woolen easement acquisitions and also Wilder Farm. There were 3 land acquisitions in 2022, FY
So
22.
Forest Legacy funds coming through to purchase easements.
Okay. Thank you for looking into that. All right, there are a couple more slides here.
Yep.
Well, this is typical.
Yep.
The ups and downs. So if there's anything there that you have questions on, I find these forms a little
Very
painful to look
challenging.
at.
Essentially, anything that's represented on here is a change from FY 2022, FY 2023. So anything that's on here is either up or down from this fiscal year. If you have any questions,
Okay.
I don't know if you want me to walk through it line by line, probably not. Painful.
No, I'm guessing not. Although we have time, and if anybody else would like to see it or has questions about it, I'll just mention again for the committee's sake that we need to make a recommendation on what we've just looked at to appropriations. So we need to make a recommendation on the new positions, those 5 positions, and the one-time, those positions, limited service positions. And then the $2 million, total of $2 million, I think, for the 3 different programs. So if anybody has any questions about any of that, how, just in terms of administering the grants, maybe we didn't really talk about that one, the outdoor recreation grant match. Is that standing up a new?
No, we already run the grants program. It would just be standing up the matching component to it. It's already matched. We just have to figure out how to get it out equitably to the small community. So we already run those grant programs, so they'll happen without the matching funds. We'll just get those dollars to communities that typically can't get them.
How will low-income communities be identified?
That's to be determined, but there is that work going on in the Agency of Administration to help out with, I think they're calling them vulnerable, I don't know, small communities, or there is a ranking of 60 communities have been identified as needing technical assistance. We could use that, but that has not been, haven't designed that yet.
Yeah, I think we had taken some testimony on that back for the Budget Adjustment Act and.
That's, yes.
Right, yeah, for eligibility for the municipal assistance, yeah.
Could be very similar to that, I'm guessing.
Representative Rice, did you have a question? Okay. All right. Good. Well, I'm speechless.
Are you looking?
We finished early, which we never do. So, no, so we're not going to take any action right now. We'll say thank you and let you go back to work. But with the committee, we can chat for a few minutes if you want to have a discussion, because at this point now we have heard from everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see everybody.
For having us.
So, yeah, we've had, I think, all the testimony we're going to get, except that at 2:00, we do have the Agency of Agriculture coming back in specifically to have us find out a little bit more about the $10 million that they have requested for processing grants. So we can, if anybody has any thoughts right now, happy to have a little conversation, or we can just break and wait until we come back at 2. And then the idea is that we'll spend as much time as we need getting our questions answered from the Agency of Agriculture on that program. And then hopefully spend some time this afternoon figuring out how to prioritize the different requests that we've gotten. Any questions about the process, or just what we're hoping to do here?
Is there one budget number that they're requesting to be approved? Or does it, are there different budgets for forests, different
Yeah. So,
budgets for parks, and different budgets for recreation, and would we approve one and not?
Well, I think that for our purposes, we can say hypothetically, for what we've just looked at, that we could hypothetically say, we like the sound of this program, but we're not comfortable with the others, so we're going to approve this or these positions, but not something else. Hypothetically, we could certainly say that. This is separate from the agriculture request, and then the commerce.
And there's nothing, I just don't have the knowledge or analytic time spent to think that one, it's just a question.
Rodney, you want to say?
The Appropriations Committee does the budget for everything in the state. Generally, what we do is the one-time money they're looking for, just I believe it's already in the governor's budget.
This, yeah.
But it's one time, first time, one time. So when the Appropriations Committee is looking at the budget, they need to know whether it's worth that extra one-time money. You know, so.
And they want advice from this committee on that?
Yeah, because we're a committee of jurisdiction, that particular enforcement. But they want to see who we recommend to approve those requests.
Thank you.
I think that's layman's way to.
Yeah, good. That's a good way of summarizing it. Representative Supple?
I've just seen some different terminology around the budgeting, and I'm a little curious. So we've got the Agency of Agriculture's budget, which I believe is different from the governor's budget.
It's the state, well, it's a subsection of the governor's budget.
Okay, very good.
The numbers should be the same.
And then all of the testimony we're receiving all ties to the agency's budget, if I understand correctly. So all these programs, even some of the nonprofits perhaps, are all receiving this through the route of the agriculture agency, if I understand correctly.
I think that's probably true. Yes. So for example, the Farm to School grant program, we took testimony from various people came in and said, we urge you to approve a $500,000 budget amount, which is in the governor's budget request. And then we also heard testimony from many of the same sources about the local purchasing incentive, $500,000, which was not in the governor's budget request.
Okay.
And then we've had, those are just two examples. And then there are others that we haven't heard anything from, perhaps, that were in the governor's budget that. Yeah.
So we're putting forth things that are not in the budget yet, and we're deciding on things that may be in the budget, but we're giving it a yes or no. And I think, the details of that were just cleared up here, so.
Yeah, so for example, I don't think anybody came in to say, yeah, we like the idea of the $500,000 for park staff housing. We might have had somebody say, endorse that, or say, make it twice that amount. We didn't hear any testimony on it at all from anyone else.
And just one more thing. So this is the assumed route of funding through the agency. Are there ways that certain programs can be funded from a different route? Meaning, the NRCC, they receive their funding through the agriculture agency. But could we recommend that they get their funding directly through the governor rather than through the agency?
That's beyond my very limited understanding of how the process works.
Yeah.
I think if we had a strong reason to want to suggest that, we could suggest it and
or explore it.
Other folks would say, yeah, we could do that, or that's not possible. But maybe Rodney knows.
I think we'd have to change the statute.
Oh, it's a statute thing. Mm-hmm.
I think probably set up at one point made law that money came out of the agency. So I think you'd have to do a new bill saying it's gonna come from somewhere, but the agency's funding comes out of the governor's budget. So I mean, everything comes out of the governor's budget.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm just, are there more direct pathways for funding? Does it have to go through this? I mean, it's a question because it got brought up at a meeting yesterday morning. Kind of as a hypothetical, like what if, it's been discussed and I asked, well, why has it been discussed? And, or why wouldn't it be applied? And just putting those questions out there.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
And just to add on, we have in the past, let's just say, somebody comes to us looking for money that's not in the budget, anybody's budget. We have made a recommendation to tropes that if they can find some additional funds, we'd like to see this program get funded. Done that for some time, but do they get it? Sometimes they don't.
Representative Rice?
I just have a point of clarification is that we're dealing with multiple agencies. So Forest Parks and Rec is
Right.
A&R.
Sorry.
Agriculture. Yeah.
Not just programs, agencies, in fact. Yeah. But they all get funded through the master agency.
They're all the administration, right? So it's.
But they're getting funding through, most of the time through the agriculture agency.
Yeah, so A&R and agriculture are.
A&R, I understand, are different, and they do present here too, you're
So
right.
Forest Parks and Rec is A&R.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for that clarification.
Good. All right, well, why don't we stop here